Rightio, ladies and gentlemen, here we are on a Saturday, a nice cold Saturday in North Queensland here. Nanette, how you going?
I'm doing well, thanks. Yeah, it's certainly the chilly today, isn't it? I mean, oh my goodness. Yeah, I don't know what the temperature is where you are. It's probably similar to what it is here, but we're looking at 14 degrees, and I've got a house I think is completely designed for the tropics, so
Yeah,
it's a bit chilly.
I just checked the temp just before, and it's saying it's 13 in air. So that's I don't know if many people have been to air before, but 13 degrees in air generally is pretty cold. So
Yeah, I know. Well, here we are, Brendan. We're here at week 4 of our little show, and it's pretty exciting because I think we had something like 13,000 in our reach last week with last week's show. So getting a lot of people interested in the stuff that we're been talking about with various people. So I'm pretty
it was
excited.
quite good. There's a lot of good feedback there from with Malcolm Roberts there from One Nation. So it was well received. You know, some of the comments that we actually received, like in terms of what people learnt, was quite interesting. So I think one comment sort of made me smile a bit. He said, what did he say? The best current affairs program I'd seen in years. So you know, it's good to get that feedback early on in the show's
yeah, for sure. I mean, you know, we're learning how to do this as we go along too. I had some commentary or some comments that came back to me too, and one fellow said to me that he learned more in the 90 minutes than he's learned in his life about politics. So it's good that sort of stuff's we're getting that feedback. But yeah, we've had a bit happening in the north this week, Brendan. I was looking at today's Townsville Bulletin, and quite a demanding front page headline. Unlock the north. So we've got people left, right, and centre up this way saying it's time to unlock the north and let some business get back to function, at least for the regional people within our own borders too, of course. But I think
definitely the feedback has been, you talk to people, often talk about the pub test. The feedback that I'm hearing is, open up North Queensland, let it get back to business. We've had very little cases. I think I read in the news this morning that there was two cases confirmed in Queensland, but I'd say that's in the southeast. So
yeah, it is. There's been no cases in Townsville and the Outback and Mackay. Notified cases 4 weeks, and it's been a lot longer than that. And we've certainly, those regions that I mentioned have had no community transmission. So
yeah, exactly. So my thing is don't let the people from down south up here. Let's get back to normal. The fact is that we can probably get kicking a lot sooner, and that way, we can get back to business and move forward.
That's right. I mean, I read today too that we've got something like 90 million in the North Queensland economy a week being lost, and we've got now an extra 20,000 people out of work up here. And I think it was Dale last member for Burdekin actually said we've got 53 in quarantine, but those 53 are holding the North Queensland economy to ransom. It's interesting because Robbie Catter mentioned that this is just another example of the same old problem, which is, we've got to get more autonomy up here and a lot more flexibility because, we're just too big. Queensland is too big for one set of rules. And Nick Demetto, I think he said, that's the member for Hinchinbrook, there's no COVID in Townsville for 2 months. So no community transmission. Scott Stewart, the member for Townsville, he says, look, he's a Labor member, and he said, we need to protect all of Queensland. Well, I don't disagree with that, but when you don't have the problem up here in the north, I think the model could be a bit different. And one of the arguments is that, the 150 kilometre rule of, travel rule, well, that's okay for the southeast. You can go to the Sunshine Coast, you can get to the Gold Coast. So, there's some movement going around that can sort of generate a bit of the economy. But here, 150 kilometres is just not far enough. I think the member for Thuringowa, Aaron Harper, he said, Queensland is supporting those businesses that are struggling, and we'll get through this, Townsville. Coralie O'Rourke, the member for Mundingborough, she said, you know, we've got some more easing coming up for stage 2 and June 12th, but I don't think the easing is enough for the north. Would you agree?
No, definitely not. I think I open it back up, keep the people from down south, keep them down there, open up North Queensland, let us get on with it.
Yeah, you know, I think also some of the statistics that came out this week is that there was a survey done and 55% of our tourism and hospitality businesses envisage that they will not reopen. So they're, you know, like, wow. That's dramatic. That's dramatic.
That's full on.
Yeah.
I was talking to a guy midweek. He's always been involved with tourism, and he's he's not going to be doing anything with tourism this year. He's coming up to he's going to be driving haul outs so he'll be doing the crush. So for that guy, you know, he lives and breathes tourism. To see someone like that not doing what he loves, you know, that's very disappointing. But like he said, he can't live on Vegemite and cardboard. So that's, you know, he's obviously got to move to where what's going to be sustainable for him. So.
Yeah, well, I think the Southeast Queensland government, that's like what I like to call them, really needs to wake up and listen to the north and listen to the people in the north, because they will pay a huge price come October if they don't. And that's just my personal opinion.
Yeah, it'll be interesting.
Yeah, but we've got a special guest today who's going to talk about other matters, and one of our local politicians in the north, and that is, of course, you know, a very well-regarded politician, a federal member, and his name's George Christensen. So I'm really looking forward to listening to what he has to say. George Christensen, the member for Dawson. So how about we invite him in
It'll be interesting, because obviously George's got a fair bit of pressure on. He's been in the media there in terms of the China stuff, and I know he's a supporter of the seventh state. So it should be a good interview today.
Well, yes, we will be asking about that, won't we? Yeah.
Yeah. Don't forget to send us any questions if you want any questions answered. Just unmute George there. George, how you going, mate?
Hello, George.
Very good. How are you both going?
Yeah, not too bad. Good. Thank you. No, thank you for coming on our show. We're really pleased that you could be here today and to chat about not just the Parliamentary Inquiry into China, but also North Queensland, as you know, your vision or your thoughts on North Queensland becoming the seventh state of Australia, but also other things, because we hope to be able to provide people a bit more background information about our elected leaders and who they are as people as well. So thank you, George. Thank you a great deal for coming on the show.
Oh, it's great to be on your show, Nanette and Bunny. Thanks for having me.
No worries.
All right, well, we'll start with just about, you know, the question, you know, tell us a bit about your background and your life before politics. And of course, we'd love to hear about your wife, April.
Yeah. Well, it's not such an exciting story, to be honest. I mean, I came from a fairly average background, a fairly humble background. Grew up in Mackay, where I still now live, so I haven't shifted far from point zero. Born in a hospital that no longer exists here in Mackay, to mother and father that were both actually people who had disabilities. My father lost his leg to cancer when he was 19, and mother had epilepsy. So it's very difficult for them, obviously. You know, my dad, when he lost his leg and then had to rehabilitate, walked into the old Commonwealth Employment Service and asked how they could help him get into a job, and they told him, forget about it, mate, you won't be working, here you go, disability. But Dad didn't accept that advice. He was a taxi driver, working all day and all night. I can remember when I was a kid, we didn't see him so much because he was driving a lot in the evenings. Yeah, look, very sort of modest upbringing, I guess, of the financial difficulties that we're in. I was one of those kids that went to school barefoot, you know. It's like it's Wawa poor me. We almost revelled in the nickname Barefoot Bandit. So anyway, after high school, after schooling, I went on to university where I studied journalism. But my first job, my first job was sweeping floors, and my second job was working in a printing factory where I had to be a member of the AMWU. So I can put that on my...
Disclose that.
Oh, we've lost him for a second. Maybe he'll come back in. Hang on.
You back, George?
The wonders of technology.
Yeah, yes,
good,
you're back. Just don't move.
Thanks for this NBN, Malcolm. Yeah. Sorry. So I'm actually, to be honest, if that happens again, sorry to your viewers, I'm on 4G at the moment because I'm getting something done with the fixed broadband, and so because it's raining here in Mackay, the signal drops out every so often. So hopefully that isn't something that we experience repeatedly through this. But anyway, to cut the long story short, job straight out of university was in a printing factory where I was a member of the AMWU because you had to be. So I've been a unionist, worked as a journalist, was in another union then, the Media Entertainment Alliance.
Oh, I think we've lost him again.
Happened again.
Yeah, no, got you back.
Yeah. If it happens again, what I might do is log out completely and log back in again.
All right, we can do that. We can
find a more stable connection. Sorry, guys.
No, that's okay. That's okay.
Yeah.
We'll roll with it.
Anyway, I ended up working after journalism for a while as a press secretary for a politician. Now, I've been interested in politics since high school, actually, which is a bit weird. But eventually decided to chart my own course there and became a local government councillor for 6 years in Mackay.
Yeah.
I had a local business at that time, for most of that time running a local newspaper, one of the sort of weekly throwaway rags that you get chucked into your yard free. Sold that business, and in 2010 was encouraged by a number of people to stand for federal parliament, and for all my sins I did, and here I am.
Good stuff. So as you were growing up and then, doing your business and then, being sort of motivated and pushed into the direction of federal. Oh, we lost him again. Okay, we might...
I'm back, but I might log out altogether and come back in.
Okay, we'll test. Yeah,
I'll let you guys talk amongst yourselves while I'm away.
Yeah, okay.
That's okay.
We'll wait for you. Okay. Oh, well, technology, got to love it, don't we?
Yeah, definitely. Obviously, an early shot at Malcolm Turnbull there, which is pretty funny. I don't think there's been any love lost. I think in Malcolm's book, I obviously didn't read it, but I'd say with some of the stuff that Malcolm said about George, and it'd be interesting to ask him. There's a few questions here we're going to ask about Malcolm and his relationship with him.
Yeah. No, but, absolutely. Interesting around the time that his latest biography or autobiography was released, the public reaction. I was watching it and following it, and I just thought, wow, it seemed quite negative, really, didn't it? I mean, he was promoting his book and, being interviewed on Sunrise, I think it was, and a few other places, but just the feedback from the general public, I felt was more in the percentage of negative than positive. What about you?
Oh, for sure. Like the problem, and I probably looked at it early. I thought Malcolm Turnbull, I thought he was pretty ordinary. Like he was, in terms of a conservative leader, I thought he was absolutely dreadful. Some of the things that he was pushing, I don't think was good for the country. They talked about the NBN. One of the most disappointing things there, you know, you've got, what was it, $50 billion? Someone could fact check us there, but a $50 billion project, and just the way it was rolled out was just terrible. You know, we're still years after. You know, you've got these problems, you've got rolling problems, you've got even the way that they currently get paid for it, the way that they service it. You know, it's just, to me, it's, you know, the technology moves that quick. You know, there were so many other options, and unfortunately, it seems like, and I don't like to use the word corrupt, but I think there was probably a bit of that. I don't think if they would have done, if they would have probably done it correctly, I think it would have killed things like Foxtel and all that. And I think that was maybe protected for a reason. I don't know if anyone agrees with me there, but that's my opinion.
Well, I think we've got George back. Just entering him back into the room. Just trying to get his video going. Yeah, no, I actually ordered the book. I ordered the book out of curiosity, but unfortunately, because of COVID, I'm still waiting for it. I ordered it through Dymocks, and it was ages ago, and I still don't have it. So I'm waiting patiently for it to arrive in my post box. So anyway, we'll see, and I will read it with interest, with great interest. Hello, George.
You there again, George?
Yeah, I'm here. Hopefully this connection.
Oh, you're much
better.
clearer.
Whatever you've done
actually.
there, we can actually see the video now, so that's good.
Okay, great.
We'll just get into Malcolm Turnbull about what we thought was the NBN was a poorly organised thing. I don't know if you agree or disagree.
Well, look, you know, in hindsight, yes. I mean, it was poorly done from the get-go, though, with the Labor Party. I've got to say that, you know, if you really wanted to build an NBN broadband network or an NBN network, what you do is say, well, where are the areas that the private sector isn't going to cover properly? Tell the private sector, you guys build where it's economically viable, and then come to us and tell us where it's not, and then we'll funnel in the funds to do the rest of it. As it is, what we've done is spent billions of dollars.
What was it, 50 billion?
Yeah. It started off, it was going to be, you know, I think actually that was the second figure. I can't remember the first, but the second figure was about 35 billion. Now it's 50 billion, and quite honestly, it's probably higher than that. I've lost count.
Unbelievable.
But you could have got, you spend all these billions of dollars rolling it out in capital cities where private companies would have probably done that. In fact, probably some of them already had it. And you know, they've spent even more money rolling out wireless towers for the NBN in places that I know that private companies already had high-speed wireless broadband towers. So you know, it beggars belief that you would have done that rather than going to the private sector and saying, hey, let's work together so that everyone connected to some form of high-speed broadband that provides a flat rate. It would have been cheaper, but, you know, that decision was made at the get-go, and I guess that it just become more of a mess from there.
Wow. Yeah, crazy. But on the topic of the Turnbull government, or at least Malcolm Turnbull as the leader of the LNP at that time, you know, do you feel as though the party was heading in the wrong direction under his leadership?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
110%, if it could be. Oh, look, I'll give you a scoop. I would have resigned had Malcolm Turnbull still been the leader. I would not. Not have contested the 2019 election.
Wow.
You know,
that's massive, George. You know,
would you
have thought about another party before you'd resigned, or no?
Probably not. Probably not.
Okay.
You know, but if the Liberal and National parties had kept on going down that track and becoming more and more of the Turnbull sort of so-called progressive liberal government, then yeah, perhaps I would have let my membership lapse. I mean, I can remember the fateful night that afternoon, actually, I think it was, or it might have been evening, that Malcolm Turnbull rolled Tony Abbott. I mean, for all of Tony Abbott's faults, I mean, he was the man who basically he pretty much won the 2010 election. It was just that we got more numbers than the Labor Party. It was just that two independents decided to cast their vote in the Parliament for the Labor Party and help them retain government. He definitely and absolutely won the 2013 election with a thumping majority. And, you know, you got to dance with the one that brung you. And for all of his faults, you could still go to Tony Abbott, talk to Tony Abbott and get things done with Tony Abbott. He listened, probably much to his detriment. He listened too much to the progressives in the party and probably didn't act with his natural political instincts a lot of the time. I think that if he did that more, he would have been much more successful. But I can remember the night that he was rolled. I actually got back to my office and I just had this packed morning and packed afternoon. And I had about an hour's break and I thought, oh, I'm just going to take a moment here just to, you know, regain my thoughts and have a little mental health hour, you know. And next thing the door busts open and someone says, Malcolm Turnbull's rolling Tony Abbott. I'm like, oh no, there goes the mental health hour. So I can remember Tony Abbott walking past after the defeat and I was standing in the whip's office of the National Party, which is just down the corridor from where the government party room is, where they voted. So Tony Abbott was walking from there after just being defeated through the corridor to where the press were gathered. I'm not sure whether he spoke to him or not, or whether he just kept on going. But he walked past me, and it was actually Michael McCormick, who was just a backbencher at that stage. And Michael, you know, I didn't know what to say. He just, you know, just the look at his face. And Michael said, I'm sorry, Tony, they've done the wrong thing. And Tony said, yep, definitely the wrong thing. And I thought, changed my faith in our government at that stage pretty much died.
Yep.
Wow.
It got reinvigorated with the election of Scott Morrison, I can tell you.
Okay. Yeah. Well, tell us a bit about Scott. Look, how would you describe his leadership style?
Look, I think Scott's great. I think that he's got the ability to be basically another John Howard. You know, John Howard obviously had his flaws. He wasn't everyone's cup of tea. There were things that I disagreed with John Howard on. But at the end of the day, he was a leader. He was the right man, right time, the right place for this nation. And I think that Scott Morrison certainly has that. His leadership during and continuing during this current crisis that the whole world is in has proven that. I think it's certainly proven that. I mean, you come in for a lot of brickbats during the bushfire season. I mean, I don't know what the left-wing media expected. They expect him to be out there holding the hose and putting out the fires himself. Actually, you know, we had a Prime Minister that did that, Tony Abbott, and they criticised him for that.
Yeah.
You can't win in this game.
You mentioned that you disagreed with some of the stuff that, you know, with John Howard. That's something that I guess more and more people struggle with. You know, like I guess what I'm trying to allude to is in politics or in anything, we seem in 2020 or we seem lately that people can't disagree on something, and you're either with them or against them. You know, do you think that's actually hurting Australia, or do you think that's how it should be? Or
No, look, I think that you're right. I think that the one major shame in the way we run our parliamentary system is, and I'll tell you who I think's to blame after that. I'll tell you the problem first. The way we run our parliamentary system is very, very rigid. There's a high level of discipline, and you know, it's culturally seen as a bad thing with certain consequences if you don't toe the party line.
Mm.
That's not the case in the US. That's not the case in the UK. We are one of the few big parliamentary democracies where that sort of rigidity is in the system. I'm hearing a little bit of feedback, guys.
Yeah, sorry. That's,
yeah.
I think that's me.
Okay. Yeah. So look, I think that the people to blame are the mainstream media. Actually, whenever someone talks out against what's seen as their own side, I mean, the media make a big thing about that. Oh,
well, that's you currently, like with you know, the inquiry into China.
Oh yeah, and it's all nonsense as well, because everything that I have said has been pretty much in accord with what the Prime Minister, Trade Minister and Foreign Minister have said. If you actually look at the core message, I mean, the way I'm delivering it might be a little bit more punchy, but the core message that I'm saying, which is this, that we must pivot away from China economically, because they are now issuing threats to our nation, which hurt our workers, our industries, our farmers and our businesses.
Yeah.
And that is no different from the statements that Trade Minister Simon Birmingham has made. No different to the strong statement that the Prime Minister made the other day when he said, "For a great trading nation, we will never trade away our values."
Yeah. Yeah.
We're not just going to buckle because there's trade threats issued to us. We're not going to buckle on foreign policy approaches or any other matter for that matter. And that's what I'm saying. And you know, we need to reposition ourselves as a nation to stop those threats and stop those coercive actions from affecting us and affecting our workers and affecting our businesses and affecting our farmers.
Sorry, you go, Brendan. Yeah. Sorry, I was just going to ask.
Do you think China, like with them coming out and saying that our barley farmers are essentially subsidised 80%, like you know, everyone knows that
Nonsense.
The Australian and New Zealand farmers are the least subsidised in the world. I think there's, in terms of subsidy, I think Australian farmers get subsidised 5%. So that would be fuel and different things like that. Whereas I think the average, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's about 42% worldwide. Like, so in terms of every other farmer in the world, the average is 42. And I think it even goes as high as 62% or 65% subsidy. So, you know,
very interesting you raised this, because if you bear with me for 1 second, I actually got the Parliamentary Library to do a bit of information on me the other day, which wasn't about subsidies, but it was about, and I'm not sure that I'm going to find it. It wasn't about subsidies, but it was about what supports. So, you know, you got to understand under international trading rules, I mean, governments are allowed to provide some sort of supports for specific reasons to sectors. It's not just like any assistance to a sector becomes a subsidy and therefore is disallowed. But I asked the question, how much support is given to Australian farmers by governments, federal and state, to other developed nations and our global agricultural trade competitors? So they did up a bit of a table for me here. Agricultural support as the percent of gross farm receipts from selected countries from 2010 to 2018. And if you have a look, let's just take the latest figure, the 2018, New Zealand. So you got to remember what this is saying. It's the agricultural support given by governments as a percentage of the gross farm receipts. Okay, so what they earn, it's a percentage of what they earn.
So you're
0.5% in
saying
New Zealand.
So hang on, just to clarify. So just say it's a $10 billion industry, a percentage of that $10 billion.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Yeah.
0.5% in New Zealand. They're the lowest.
Yep.
We can get on to Australia, 2.5%.
Okay.
Brazil is a bit lower than us. That's at 1.5, and Chile's 2.3, believe it or not, according to the figures. Canada, 8.8%. The USA, 12.2%. We look to Japan, 46.7%.
Wow.
Korea, 55.1%. And good old China that's complaining about us, 14.3%. Across the OECD countries, it's 19.2%. And across the EU, 20%. So, you know, it is nonsense that we are subsidising our farmers. In fact, if anything, we're considerably behind what the rest of the world is doing.
Do you think it's because we've never starved as a nation? That's why we sort of a bit reluctant to do that. Are we that? Like, I'm not saying I'm not about subsidising. I'm about bringing down the cost of doing business more so.
I think there's a number of factors at play, Bunny. I think that one of them is we have been for a long while completely and utterly married to this economic orthodoxy, which is just complete and utter crap. And, you know, the economic orthodoxy is free trade at all costs. And quite honestly, there's no such thing as free trade. We call these agreements free trade agreements, but they're not. They're just simply trading agreements. Because even built within them is certain restrictions. And so I think that that's been to our detriment, the idea of completely unfettered free markets, which is nonsense. We don't have them in this country anyway. But while that economic orthodoxy prevails, we have the system that we have. I've got to say that the flip side of it is you've got the reason other countries do it so much, particularly these developing countries and Asian countries, is because farmers are very different there than they are here. You know, people over there that don't own land, that either squat or they rent off the government or rent off someone else. And they have very small plots. They're subsistence farmers. They farm in poverty. They grow a patch of rice, you know, might keep a third of it for themselves, sell 2/3 to the bloke down the street. And, you know, that sort of system, you think about the number of people that are involved in it, it becomes just about the bulk of the populace. And therefore, if the governments don't support their farmers, they get voted out.
It becomes more of an issue.
It's a political issue. It's not a political issue in Australia because there's very few farmers, sadly. But I think that there's a growing change in the mood of the public towards helping our farmers more, particularly in times of drought and that sort of stuff. But there's one more thing to be said for that. And I did a podcast the other day. I'll just give a plug. This is what this thing's behind.
No, that's all right.
Go to conservative1.com. There's some very good podcasts up there. But I did one with someone that you guys know in the Burdekin, Alan Parker.
Yeah, Parks, yeah.
An activist in the cane farming sector. He's now retired from that and he's off the farm. But we had a long talk about some of these issues. And, you know, that in countries like, EU countries, particularly, say, France, I think it might be, there is a benefit or a positive notion that's ascribed to the concept of keeping farms for cultural reasons almost, which might seem a bit bizarre, but I think that there is a benefit in promoting landholding and promoting deriving your life off a property, and the loss of that makes your country poorer. It really does. It's talking about food security and all the rest of it. I'm talking about something cultural. I'm talking about something even almost deeply spiritual. But
well, on that point,
philosophical topic.
George, I think I saw on one of your posts that, the Chinese own 9.1 million hectares of Aussie farmland.
Yeah, they do.
So, and that's, well, I think you put there was the size of, roughly the size of North Queensland. That's big ownership, isn't it? I mean, let's talk about foreign investment in the country. I think that the Chinese are the 5th biggest investor in Australia from some data that I looked at, with the US, UK, Belgium and Japan before China. But I'm really curious to know about the role of the Foreign Investment Review Board, because I have read some, claims that it probably needs rejigging, reshaping. It needs to change the regime around that review board. What are your thoughts on that and foreign investment generally?
Well, I'll go out on the limb here to say that my research has indicated that China is the biggest, biggest. And people always throw that, you probably read that online, people throw that back and say, oh, there's countries that are bigger. The problem is that we know that there's been a huge boost in recent years in Chinese investment in Australia.
Especially around Sydney with the houses.
Yeah, the houses, and that's what I incorporate. If you incorporate all of that stuff into the equation, is the biggest. The big problem that we've got is that there is no known register of everything.
Okay.
Because if it's under $1 million or under 15 million, it doesn't have to get registered. Is that right?
That's right. That's
so
right.
This comes in line with the Foreign Investment Review Board requiring
you're saying that
some
number
changes.
would be not real.
Interesting.
Look, I don't think it's right, but I think that there's enough evidence out there to say that China is now the biggest.
Okay.
The UK used to be the largest investor, and I think it might have been the US second. I've got to check, but that's what's coming to me for agricultural holdings.
Okay.
China's agricultural holdings have just expanded exponentially over recent years. They are now in the running for number one. I think that if they're not at number one by now, that they are number two and breathing down the neck of
one.
I think who's holding the number one position. So China have made a concerted effort to buy up as much as they can in our country.
Shore up food security.
Yeah, and that's what it's all about, Bunny. You got it. Can I just say on that for a second? That
definitely food
issue. You hear the word national interest bandied about a lot, and I think that there's a confusion around what the national interest is. A confusion between the political elites, the media elites, and the everyday public. The national interest means it's got to benefit somehow your nation. Yeah. Now, if you've got a Chinese state-owned enterprise that buys up the land, they buy up the water that goes on the land, they buy up the agricultural processor, which processes the produce that comes off the land combined with the water, and then they send all of that produce and the profits and the taxes back to China.
And then they import their own workers.
Yeah.
And then they use agreements to bring in specialised technical workers, which might meet the rules, perhaps not the spirit of the law, though.
Yeah.
Can you tell me what in that process, what in that whole chain of events is in the national interest? And this is the question. And I think that we need to have a better defined national interest test when it comes to foreign investment. And we need to have a body like FIRB serious about it and actually people on saying, sorry, that's not in the national interest.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting with FIRB, or the Foreign Investment Review Board. I mean, it was established in the 1970s, and the fear was around too much American investment in the country at the time. So, but since then, I think, I mean, obviously I'm not an expert, I'm just going on what I've read. Since then, there are calls for some real changes with that review board and the way business is done.
Interestingly, during the course of this inquiry and the publicity around it, I've had people from all walks of life reach out to me talking about this.
Yeah.
One of them just happened to be someone who worked in Treasury, and I won't name him, but someone who worked in Treasury at the time that they established the Foreign Investment Review Board. And he worked in that section for quite a while. His area he was looking into was real estate, and he was quite critical of how the Foreign Investment Review Board and Treasury now actually goes about assessing these things. He was scathing, in fact. So there's people that are coming out of the woodwork now who are speaking up about it because they see that now is a critical time, and now our country can make a turnaround.
Yeah.
Do you think people from this COVID thing will become a bit more patriotic towards Australia, or do you think not?
I think that they are. I think people actually innately have it in them in the main, and the amount of feedback that I've gotten since I've started. I've been speaking out about this China situation for a long while, perhaps not as loudly and forcefully, but you can see speeches that I did back to 2018. Hell, if you really dive deep, you could see things that I was saying and doing, before I was even in politics. But this is really, I guess what's happened has made the issue front and centre for me. Quite honestly, this is the biggest issue of our times. Everything else pales in comparison. As a member of Parliament, I can't say, well, this is all I'm going to focus on.
Yeah, there's a lot of other issues.
Of course, there's a lot of needs in an electorate. There's a lot of issues that go around. But I can say without a doubt that this issue of China, as an attempt to pretty much take over the world, however they can, economically, strategically, through its control of
ports,
of trade lines, ports, whatever. This is the biggest issue of our time. Absolutely.
When you see a premier like Daniel Andrews, what do you just sit there and shake your head at someone like that, like who just seems to be wholly and solely, like I think he signed up to the what is it, the Belton Road?
Belton Road, yeah.
And if you have a look at what they're doing with this, I mean, again, this is so there's a document that's come out of the Chinese military that was drafted that now is guiding Chinese policy. It was called Unrestricted Warfare.
2015, I think that came out.
Yeah, Unrestricted Warfare. So this document is now one of the guiding sort of principles for Chinese foreign policy, and it melds into the Belt and Road Initiative, that they are running a system where they are trying to turn countries economically into vassal states, particularly developing countries, but any first world country like Australia that gets so entangled will come under their control. They don't have to invade. All they need to do is
ask for the debt.
All they need to do is to control your supply lines.
It's economic invasion.
How was it that not more people are talking about? It'd be fine if it was
they are, but you get the same. Just talk about Dan Andrews for a second, then I'll get on to what other people are and aren't saying. But Daniel Andrews, Chairman Dan, as they call him, of Victoriastan, he is what they used to term in the Cold War a useful idiot. He is someone who, and that's being nice actually, useful idiots. That's what they call people who basically did the bidding of the communists at the time, working for them, but thinking they were doing the right thing. And the communists said, this is a useful idiot for us. This is someone who really doesn't know or doesn't understand or doesn't believe in what our ulterior motive is, and we can use this person for our own ends. That's what Daniel Andrews is doing, and that's what many other people are doing. I mean, you get the common feedback, oh, well, what about the US? Well, what about the US? The US is a democracy. The US has been an ally. The US does bad things like any other country, but when those bad things are exposed, it often is punished at the ballot box. The US is a country that harvests organs of political dissidents. The US isn't a country that crushes Christianity, crushes people of the Muslim religion like the Uyghurs, crushes Buddhists because they're worried that somehow religion and spirituality is going to be something that causes the overfall of the nation.
Yeah.
They haven't then gone into a sovereign territory like Hong Kong and basically put in, and I hate to use the Nazi analogy, but it's been described to me today like this, they've put in the Gestapo.
Yeah.
The Chinese have now set up their national security police and laws within Hong Kong. Was a democratic, peaceful place. It's now going to be ruled by an iron fist.
Yeah.
So, how far is that going to be pushed? I mean, we call the US is sometimes browbeaten as being imperialist, but in the main, if it goes into wars and like the Iraq War, in retrospect now, I don't agree that we shouldn't have done that. But they removed themselves after a period of time. What does China do? It has imperialist designs. It has imperialist designs on other places. If you haven't read the book Silent Invasion by Professor Clive Hamilton, I'd suggest get a copy of it and read it thoroughly. On page 21 or 22 of that book, he outlines how the then Chinese Premier came to Australia, spoke in the National Parliament, in the Australian Parliament, and made specific remarks about how China had first discovered, mapped Australia and actually interacted and traded with Australian Aborigines. Complete and utter nonsense, complete and utter historical revisionism, never happened, no proof of it whatsoever. But he made that claim and they actually believe it. And it's very important because under Chinese law, the actual legal parameters for ownership of property, of territory, is that you first discovered it, you first mapped it, and you first set foot on it.
So they believe they already own us.
Oh, wow. Look, George, with the inquiry, what do you hope is, a range of outcomes? What would you like to see happen after post-inquiry?
The biggest thing I want to see happen now, and I haven't said it yet, but www.chinainquiry.com.au, if people go to that, they can have their say. What I'm wanting, problem is the Parliament, that we often hear from all of the groups, all of the institutional groups, all of the academics, all of the so-called experts. The person we don't hear from in parliamentary inquiries so much
is the people.
Average Australian. Yep.
Okay.
And I often notice, having been there for nearly 10 years, that we get this divergence where when we do hear from people, they're saying one thing, and when we hear from the academics and the groups and the policy institutes and all the rest of it, they're saying something else altogether. So I want the people to flood this inquiry. That's why I've set up this website to help them put in submissions to the website, to the inquiry, I'm going to say, submissions to the inquiry. They can do that through my website, or they can just do it themselves. And the email address to send it to is jsctig@aph.gov.au, jsctig@aph.gov.au. So JSCTIG stands for Joint Standing Committee on Trade and Investment Growth. And you can Google that and you can find all the terms of reference for this inquiry. What we're looking at, though, is the question of whether Australia is now over-reliant on any one market for its trade and also foreign investment purposes. Whether that's advantaging us, I don't think so, but whether it's disadvantaging us, and what implications it has for our national economic security and the national interest, particularly looking with foreign investment into state-owned corporations and what issues that has. So if people have views on it, put in a please.
Yeah. Yeah, very important. That a lot of people always tend to have opinions and don't do anything about it. And I think, if you've got a fair bit to say about it, you're better off submitting something and actually trying to get heard rather than just sit back and whinge when nothing happens.
Well, that's right. And this is part, can I just say that this is part of the process. How we go about changing policy formally is that we have an inquiry. An inquiry produces a report with a series of recommendations to the government. And the government has to respond to those recommendations. And it often then proposes changes to the system that reflect those recommendations, or it might say, sorry, no, we're not doing that, and it'll give the reasons why. But this is part of the process. So you have your say right now. It will be part of this process that actually could lead to changes for the better.
Good.
Very good.
George,
right.
we'll just move on to a few other questions here. When obviously start of the year, was it the start of the year? I think Bridget McKenzie was no longer the agriculture minister.
Yeah.
Did I think Bridget, unfortunately, I think she was probably wasn't too bad at being ag minister. She did sometimes struggle with some of the questions in the Senate, but I think overall, how do you think her performance was?
Look, I had a pretty good relationship with Bridget when she was ag minister. Still do, actually. And think the day after, or a few days after she was sworn in as minister, she came to my electorate straight up to attend the Bowen Gumlu Growers Association annual dinner. So she wanted to get herself right into the hotspot and amongst the farmers straight away, and that was a good thing. She certainly listened to me while the bureaucrats were telling her that, the sugar code of conduct wasn't a good thing. So she phoned me up and said, tell me what your thoughts are on this. And I told her, and she said, right, well, that's what we're going to do. So, she was someone who listened, and I think that she was a good agriculture minister. And I got to say, the issues that they hounded her out of office on weren't in relation to the agricultural portfolio.
No. Would just on that, well, two things there. On that sugar code of conduct, I probably I don't think people realise how hard that was, especially with the very liberal led government. How hard a code of conduct. They were. I heard, and I was led to believe that they wanted to water it down pretty hard. And if it probably wasn't for yourself, it probably would have. Can you share a bit more on that?
Yeah, look, there are a few players in that whole code of conduct saga. And I guess David Littleproud, who now is agriculture minister again, was one of the players who was instrumental in ensuring that it is as it was as it becomes. So, but yes, it was difficult. Yes, there were people within the government and in the opposition and on the crossbenches as well who were opposed to it. There were certainly people in the industry. Sadly, there are even some farmers who are opposed to it, who shall remain nameless, but came down to Canberra and tried to do their best to nobble the idea when the majority of the industry wanted it to be brought in. So there was a lot of opposition around the traps, but it was the right thing to do when you have, and for the Labor Party to oppose it, let me just say, I thought when I started this that I would actually get more support out of Labor than I did out of some of my Liberal colleagues. How wrong I was. The Labor Party believe in a system where if you're a worker, you should have minimum terms in a contract, that you can't deviate from, and you have an umpire. So that's a system that they believe should be in place between a worker and their boss. Now we've got a pretty similar situation here where you've got farmers and a sole miller, the only person that they can actually take their product to. So, you know, when it gets into give it or take it situation, you would think that, you know, to be fair, you'd set up a similar type of arrangement where there's minimum conditions that you need to abide by in terms of an agreement, and there's an umpire in place should that agreement
fall over,
come into conflict or fall over. So that's what we've essentially put
essentially it's just a right to arbitration. That's all.
And I agree with that. And I got to say, you know, because of the technical difficulties earlier, I know you guys wanted to ask me about, you know, why I joined the LNP. Well, I joined the National Party, and listen to this. I went just the other day through the National Party's platform the Queensland National Party's platform when I actually joined the National Party. And I got to say, I look at that and I think to myself, I haven't really shifted that much from when I first
was.
Because this is the reason why I wanted to join. So under our platform, and I've got it here on the phone, the National Party of Australia Queensland believes that an efficient primary producer is entitled to expect to receive a return on his capital, labour and expertise, which is equitable and consistent with the returns received by other sections of commerce and industry. It goes on to say that government policy should be directed to promoting the economically viable family farm as a principal unit of Australian rural production. The primary producer shall have the right to legally transport, process and market his produce without restriction. And then if I look to our policy on small business, which is intertwined with this, it says that effective legislation should be there to prevent anti-competitive conduct, to ensure fair competition for goods and services. And this one, that in the circumstances of substantial inequality of bargaining power, it is appropriate for governments to act to ensure fair dealings between the parties. Boom.
That's why you joined.
So it hasn't moved, and that, you know, I guess that's pretty frustrating to see that there'd be a lot of people in your party that would probably look at that and say, well, times have changed and so should you. But, you know, you're probably standing by exactly what you joined up all those years ago.
Oh, damn. Well, I haven't. And if that makes me a 41-year-old old fogey, then so be it.
So, George, do you think we could ever, or would you ever put your hand up to become the Agricultural Minister?
Well, given that I couldn't grow a lettuce, given that it would stop my ability to speak out if I became any sort of minister on matters that I think are of significance to my electorate or significance to the nation, honestly, probably not.
Okay.
I resigned myself fairly early in the piece to never becoming a minister, never wanting to become a minister. And that brings a sense of
freedom.
Because then you can chart another course, and the course is to try and change policies by doing whatever it takes.
It's quite interesting you say that. You know, like someone like Matt Canavan, I've probably spent, I don't know, 2 hours with Matt talking off and on. Find him quite a good guy, but it's quite interesting the Matt Canavan as a minister as opposed to a Matt Canavan as a backbencher. It seems
slightly
like
different people, aren't they?
it's like he's got his teeth back. Like he actually.
Yeah.
You have to. I mean, that's the rules. I mean, again, I mean, actually, you know, I can't compare this to anything because that's the rules of not just Westminster democratic systems, but any system that I can think of. If a minister appointed by a prime minister or a head of government comes into conflict with the head of government, then they resign their commission. So that's what I'm saying. You either that's why I think, like, you know, and this is really getting philosophical. I think that actually our parliamentary system is very much flawed because we've got a system where people are appointed to do two different things.
Look after you. Look
Those
after
things
your area.
are in conflict. People manage it as best they can, but it's just very, very difficult. And I think that would be better suited as a democracy with a different system, which didn't have members of the legislature being members of the executive. But that's a
whole different ballgame.
Whole nother discussion. Yeah, for sure.
We'll move into the North Queensland state. I know you're a supporter of it. You know, do you want to sort of touch on some stuff there? Obviously, there's a lot to cover. We've got we can start off. You know, obviously you'd support it. You know, looking at the Palaszczuk government looking to keep the borders closed. You know, we can roll through a few things here, but you know, tell us why you think it's a good idea and why you think it should happen sooner rather than later.
Sadly, one of the main things that I think why it's important is because of a major negative. And the negative is that while we accept as North Queenslanders, and could even say regional Queenslanders, but particularly North Queenslanders, while we accept the fact that, you know, while we've got the state that we've got, that there's always going to be a bucket load of money funneled into Brisbane and southeast Queensland, we're going to get a pittance in comparison to that. What really sticks in my craw, and I know sticks in a lot of people's craws, is when to appease interests in that Brisbane, southeast Queensland region, you start enacting policies which restrict our ability to earn a living and our ability to, you know, have an enjoyable life up in North Queensland. Whether it be policies around reef runoff or alleged reef runoff, which restricts farmers' ability to do what they do, whether it be cane growers or graziers, whether it be laws around mining, which we saw with the Adani debacle, you know, even some laws around things like hunting, laws around national park management, which
or lack of
big problem, lack of
definitely.
I should have said mismanagement.
But
which creates bushfires that kill people. You know, the list goes on and on. I mean, the mismanagement of the crocodile population, leading to deaths. I can remember actually when we had Q&A, and this speaks volumes. We had Q&A in Mackay. So
I was there that night.
Done in
I saw on telly.
So it was me, Pauline, and Bob Catter, and also then Kathy O'Toole, who's no longer, and Larissa Waters from the Greens. And Larissa was sitting right beside me. And interestingly, my comment was ascribed by the media to Bob. So maybe I said it in such a high-pitched voice, excited voice, that they thought it was Bob. But anyway, Larissa's sitting beside me and she says, in response to a question on what's your view on management of crocodiles and culling crocodiles, and she said, well, it's a shame to think that we can't live with our wildlife. And I said, not when they're eating you can't. I mean, she was heckled. She was booed and heckled when she made that comment.
Well, she made another comment also that only drunk
people get eaten by crocodiles.
Get eaten by crocodiles. And I was in the crowd that night, and it typified how out of touch they are, because there was people actually surrounding us. They'd actually been flown up from Melbourne. They actually flew up from Melbourne because I don't know. It's one of those things you always think that the audience is you know, for
local,
one side, and actually,
but it's not mixed.
Because when you actually go to get it, you've got to get the tickets. You've got to, you know, tell them what side of the fence you're on. You know, conservative or left leaning, and one of the things, and they actually, the feeling I got is they don't put all the conservatives together. They actually patch them around. Yeah, they mix it up like that. That's how it felt. And so where
Stage
we
managed.
were sitting,
Yeah.
you know, we were amongst more greenies than I'd like to admit, and it was quite interesting because
Yeah, well,
our views were so polar. Like we're going, yeah, no,
Mm.
Crocs are no good, and these people are going, oh, there's nothing wrong with Crocs. And I said to the girl next to me, I said, do you think you just pat a Croc and it's all good? Like they're actually their only thing on earth that they're here for is just to eat. Like that's all they do. And she's like, oh, just stay out of the water. And I'm like, they're in the water.
And you can't see them coming often.
And you can't. But the thing is, I'm like, they're in places where they know that where they're not meant to be. Like they in Innisfail, they walk up into the backyards. In Port Douglas, that poor lady, she was taken out of the old people's home. Like it's not normal to have that sort of stuff, and they just snub their nose. I just think that we're just all hillbillies. It's unbelievable.
It's like it's no one's talking about killing every single. I mean, but this is in their mind. But the interesting punchline from this event that we had was that the producer of the show of Q&A said to me afterwards, "Oh, that's the first time we've ever had an audience boo the Greens."
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. But you know, it does highlight
Welcome to North Queensland.
Yeah. It does highlight the point about decisions, you know, decentralised decision making, and I mean, you know, versus centralised decision making, and being so far removed from the realities of life. And I often, George, tell people, you know, like life is different in the north, you know, central and north. I mean, it's varied within those areas as well, whether you live on the coast or you're further inland or far up the tip. But, you know, having regulations and rules that are just so, you know, one size fits all across this very, very, very large state, is, you know, it highlights the point that you know, people are making decisions in the southeast corner largely for us in the north, and it doesn't work. You know, it's kind of like there's a piece of the puzzle just missing, and I think it's just a categorical understanding of what life is like, and we should be making decisions that affect us here in the north. So, you know, the part of the model to create the seventh state of Australia is that. But I also think, George, and I'd love your thoughts on this, it's more than that. It's bigger than that too. It would actually be good for the nation. What do you think, George?
Of course it would be, yeah. And look, absolutely, it would be good for the nation because we would create a more prosperous region. I mean, if you have self-government, well, what you're going to do is you're going to first create a capital, which is going to be a bigger and better hive of commerce and activity, and you're going to create bigger and better regional cities to reflect the fact that they are now, you know, what they call regional capitals to the main capital. And I'd suggest, you know, coming from Mackay, Townsville's obviously the place where you have the capital, although I'm not hard and fast on that, but it is naturally the centre.
The best one I've heard was make it Charters Towers. Make it Charters Towers, and I thought it was a good idea.
Well, they originally had a stock exchange there in Charters.
They did. Yeah.
So it's interesting to look at all the places that were originally thought of being a capital. If you go and have Bowen in my electorate, Bowen's got these wide streets.
That's right. Another potential
is that they were thinking that Bowen could be the capital city. Same in Rockhampton.
Yeah, there's got Kenmore House was built to be a Parliament House, or you know, went in one of the movements, the really early movements in the you know, in the early days. But there's been several. But yeah, and I mean it's a beautiful building. I think Mater Hospital owns it now. But
so there's all of these places like that were built. I think that's I shouldn't have raised it because it's probably getting bogged down into the minutiae, but minutiae will have to be sorted if and
eventually
when this comes out. But really, this will mean we can chart our own course, and we will want to develop further to be better than what we already had, and it's going to be a benefit to the entire nation. I think that we would have less restrictions around the development of industries, the development of our resources, the exploitation of our resources for the benefit of the people of North Queensland. We would
build some dams.
We would put culture. There would be things done in the state, or the new state, that would lift its economy and honestly lift the economy of the rest of the nation as a result. There are a couple of negatives that people say, well, we want to get rid of state governments, not get more of them. Well, the fact is you're not going to get rid of state governments unless you want to change the constitution. So forget that. That's not a serious argument for or against it. People say we don't need more politicians. Well, actually, yeah, why do we need more politicians? How many politicians do we have north of the Tropic of Capricorn? Just keep the same number. Keep the same number.
Yeah.
I tell you what, bring in an upper house and make the upper house every single mayor that exists in North Queensland. There's no extra.
A different model. Yeah.
Does it mean more bureaucrats? No, you've already got them.
You've already got them.
They're just
of the Tropic of
concentrated.
We just make the person who was formerly head of the Northern Office of the Department of whatever, suddenly the Director General. So, you really don't need to have more of anything. You've got the structures already in place. It's just about making decisions for ourselves that's going to benefit North Queenslanders rather than just benefiting South East Queensland.
So some of the ideas that I've heard, and I thought they're good ideas. So they're not my ideas; they're just ideas that have been put forward. For instance, you'd have the Department of Mining that might be in Mount Isa. You'd put the Department of Tourism, that might be in Cairns. The Department of Agriculture might be in Mackay. Townsville might get the Department of whatever. So you decentralise. I know Robbie Catter through the week has asked Anastasia to decentralise the government to try and get regional and rural Queensland kicking again. If we were the seventh state, that would be one of the biggest things, is to make sure that it wasn't centralised like we currently have.
Yeah.
George, you'd have to agree that Canberra is obviously a pretty centralised sort of bureaucratic. I don't know, without sort of getting into them, but they, one of the most interesting things that I've seen or heard from a lady that worked for Michelle Landry, she was telling me that some of the people that actually work in those bureaucratic offices are third and fourth generation bureaucrats. Their grandfather was.
There probably would be.
And they've never left. They go to school in Canberra, they go to university there, and they have and we go as a nation, how come we're getting held back? Well, maybe there's your answer.
Well, possibly. There's two things out of that. One, Canberra is a territory, self-governing territory that was created by people out of Melbourne and Sydney, and it works. They take their own course and they have it for just all of those people that live in the city known as Canberra. Bizarre, but yet we couldn't do it in North Queensland. Yeah. Secondly, you're right. There's too much control that's wielded in the one city for all of Australia when it comes to the Commonwealth government. But here's the difficulty in that. We didn't just try, we successfully tried, I should say, to get one agency out of Canberra. It was the APVMA, the Australian Pesticides and Veterinary Medicines Authority. Now, Barnaby asked for that to go to Armidale. This was to be the trial, the litmus test, the pilot agency that would remove itself from shackles of Canberra and position itself in regional Australia, not too far away, I've got to say, in Armidale. Yeah. There was kicking, there was screaming, there was union protests, there was people resigning. So you hear all of that and you think, and of course they said, oh, well, this is just to put it in Barnaby Joyce's electorate. But that was just a line. It didn't matter whether they put that in the Burdekin or put that in Armidale. In fact, if in the Burdekin, it probably would have been, there would have been more kicking and screaming because it's further away from Canberra. But it wouldn't have mattered where it was. They just did not want to leave. And the journalists went in and backed them and saying, oh, this is terrible. There's going to be such a brain drain out of the APVMA. No scientist wants to go to Armidale. So when we do this sort of stuff, there is a backlash from the people who work in the bureaucracy, from the unions, and their mates in the media. Very sad.
Oh, wow. All right. In terms of, the North, what do you think about whether or not we should be quarantined, or at least quarantined and open up within ourselves, within, our own little parameter to get business going? What's your position on that?
Well, I actually got some advice today. I think that they have actually allowed that to happen. I'm just going to check so I don't say the wrong thing. Sorry.
Sorry, I thought we lost you for a second there.
No, I'm wrong. I just got a media release from Tourism with Sundays, and in fact, the tourism industry is calling for a North Queensland bubble, allowing unrestricted travel between Cairns, Townsville, Whitsundays, Mackay, and the West. So I think that's something that's got a lot of merit. I've been calling for basically regional management, I guess we could say it, or as they say, closing the borders, locking the borders to North Queensland. Actually, I've got to say, I do think that now we're getting to the stage where we're beyond that.
Yeah.
The problem we've got is that Premier Palaszczuk should have enacted regional management early in the piece, when 95% of when we had a lot of cases of this COVID-19, the Wuhan coronavirus, and they were just about all in Brisbane and southeast Queensland, 95% of them. Now, at that stage, we should have basically ruled the line across different regions, including North Queensland, and say no one from southeast Queensland goes into this area unless there is really, really, really bloody good reason and tight management around their movements. They didn't. They refused. And her argument was, we're one state. We've already closed the Queensland borders. We're one state. Well, now she's using the same argument she used against, she's arguing against the argument she used against us with the Queensland borders. And she's saying, oh, well, I'm not going to reopen the Queensland borders until we see no more or less community transmission of corona. But actually, we had a case in Rockhampton, and that had to be community transmission. So I haven't seen the cause of that mentioned yet of that case. But look, I think that the deal with all of these borders, I'm 100% in favour of this North Queensland bubble. Better still, let's look at lifting as many restrictions as we can, as much as the medical professionals, the public health professionals are telling us we can right now. And I think that in time, if not already, but certainly in a short period of time, that's going to mean stop the border lockdown.
Yeah. Well, let's talk some more about COVID-19. I mean, what do you think we need to do as a state and a nation to really, address the issues that we're facing? Some key things. I mean, there's obviously a lot of things we have to do, but some key things that we have to do in moving forward.
Like in terms of manufacturing and stuff and nation building projects, what's your, I guess you could probably tie that into if you're Prime Minister for 7 days, what would, after this, what would you kick off?
Yeah, well, we're all going to learn. Now look, there's two things. One, I think we need greater economic self-sufficiency. So we need to boost our manufacturing. We've got a big problem with high input costs. So a medium to long-term measure would be looking at how we get those high input costs down. Talking about the price of water, the price of power, the cost of regulation and red tape. So that needs to be looked at. At the same time, we need to provide the right policy settings and incentives and taxation system to get manufacturing back up, particularly in the regions where it's going to make a big difference. So that's one thing that I would do straight off the bat. There needs to be a big boost in infrastructure. We're already seeing, so can I actually say on manufacturing, we're already seeing that too. Our industry minister, Karen Andrew, gave an amazing speech to the National Press Club in the last week. And if you haven't read it, go and read it, because she outlines the government's plans in relation to manufacturing. We've appointed a task force under this National COVID-19 Coordination Commission, headed by a fellow by the name of Andrew Liveris, who's former head of Dow's Chemicals, and he was one of the advisors to the Trump administration on manufacturing. So he is going to deliver a report to government that's going to have great benefits for the reboot of manufacturing in this country. Infrastructure spend. We've already seen the start of a new infrastructure spend. The Deputy Prime Minister just the other day, yesterday in fact, announced a hell of a lot of money, and I'll get the figure for you, for regional Queensland, or for regional Australia, in the form of local infrastructure projects going to councils. $500 million allocated into projects which can be underway within a month or two at the most. Most of them are ready to go. So that's going to provide, because they're smaller projects, that's going to provide immediate hit to local businesses. Can pick up that work. In the longer term, we need to see dams. We need to see major road improvements. They're the things that we need to come out. We've also got the big problem of our tourism sector, because I agree, we can't open our international borders anytime soon.
No.
We need to wait and see what happens with the rest of the world, and protect our country from this pandemic and virus. But while that's the case, there's going to have to be some further assistance provided to tourism. I've already gone public record to say that we should continue JobKeeper and business assistance and supports to affected tourism businesses that rely heavily on tourists.
Just on that, I see overnight or yesterday, the Treasurer, they've made a mistake with it was $60 billion and now it's 30.
Well,
I read that too.
So
big mistake.
Initially, like for me initially, and this is, see what you think. I go, okay, well, they made a mistake. It's half of what they thought. So be it. It's no big deal.
The funny thing is,
to me, it's now, okay, now we don't, because we had to borrow that money.
Yeah.
Now we didn't.
Yes.
Now we didn't have to borrow an extra 30 billion. That's good. That's if you're going to make a mistake, that's a good mistake.
It's a good mistake to make.
And yet the Labor Party's come out, and they're saying, oh, it's ridiculous. How can they be trusted? Oh, what's your thoughts on that? What's your take on that?
Oh, well, look, I assume someone in Treasury is getting the ruler whacked over their knuckles.
Yeah, so definitely on detention.
Era. Obviously, the government relies on the bureaucracy to get its numbers right. I don't think this was like, 1, 2, 3, 4, 60 billion, they haven't put it out like that. They've simply overestimated the amount of people that are actually
take up of it
onto this JobKeeper program. I'm going to say that we'll have to find out what happens with JobSeeker, because if you didn't go on JobKeeper, maybe you're on JobSeeker, and perhaps there's a blowout there. There might be other people that remained in positions that were continued to be supported by their employer without any supports from government. I don't know. But the way the Labor Party's saying is, yes, $60 billion. Oh, well, we've now got $60 billion that we can spend.
We've got an extra 30.
No, all of that is money that's being borrowed. Like we had $60 billion to spare to spend. This is debt. This is further debt.
Yeah, that's right.
It is an error. It's a good error. Have discovered, because it means that we've saved taxpayers having to pay back an extra
$30 billion.
So, but having said that, there's I don't want to get into double speak or politician speak here, but I do believe actually there's there's good debt and there's bad debt to get into, and the good debt that you get into is when it's for the purposes of long-term infrastructure that you can pay back over the period of life of that infrastructure. And I learnt that from local government. When you go and build a road, the road might cost, I don't know, if it's a substantial road, it might cost 300 million for a big section of a highway. And that road's lifespan is about 30 years. So therefore you work out the repayments on that, you know, $10 million a year over the 30 years. So that's good debt. Bad debt is when it's just funneled into something that's consumed straight away.
Like a tunnel in Brizzy.
Yeah, well,
another tunnel.
You got to look.
What do you mean a tunnel? Go with it. Oh, look, let's just, before we wind up, because I am conscious of time and you've given us a great deal of your time, I just want to hear you, your thoughts on, outside of the LNP, your thoughts on some of the other politicians that we have in this country, and who do you think are the effective ones, the ones that, you know, you kind of look at and go, yeah, that's pretty cool. They're all right.
If I can say on all of the sides, including the LNP, well, Matt Canavan, you've mentioned, and I think that he's a star performer. And if I was to say to look out for someone who's going to get bigger and better in years to come, it will be Matt Canavan. Craig Kelly is an absolute trooper on the issues of exposing climate activism and bogus climate science. Andrew Hastie is someone to watch, absolutely. He will also, like Matt Canavan, become someone who's bigger and better in the future. Then I could talk more about so many other people within the LNP, but you've asked about others.
Yeah.
Within the Labor Party, I have a lot of time for Senator Alex Gallagher. Alex Gallagher is very sick at the moment, sadly, but he's one of those old school Labor people. There are, someone who was in the Labor Party that I had more than just a lot of time for. I considered him a mate, was Michael Danby, but he's now gone. Chris Hayes in the Labor Party is also a gentleman and one of the old school Labor people, true believers. Now his name escapes me. Sorry, he's a new senator in the Labor Party. He's from the Shoppies. Raf Ciccone. Raf Ciccone is his name. He's also one of the good guys in the Labor Party. Of course, then you have people like Pauline Hanson, Malcolm Roberts, who I think are doing a great job. Bob Catter, of course, speaking up for the North as well. Philip Thompson is someone to watch too in the Townsville area. I mean, he's making a lot of inroads for someone who's just got onto the scene. So I think that just about pulls me up, but I would say within the Greens, I'll have to wash my mouth out after that, but I have a bit of time for Peter Wish-Wilson.
Okay. Oh, thanks for sharing. And on a final note, we haven't heard, I was going to ask you right at the very beginning, and I think I did before we got cut off. I was going to ask you about
I remember you said
April.
It, and I thought
yes.
I hadn't mentioned, yes.
Oh.
So April's great. We've been married now since September last year.
Yeah.
She's fantastic. I don't know what to say. She comes from the Philippines. Comes from a little area called, it's not a little area, it's a big area called Novaliches. Her family are all over there, of course, so it sometimes gets difficult, but she's fluent in English, as all Filipinos are. But obviously when you come to somewhere like Mackay that's halfway around the world from where you were, you find like. So she's developed a network of close friends here that have also come from the Philippines that are in Mackay, and so that's
lovely. Yeah.
George, just on that, and I know this is probably a bit tough for you, but I know your mother passed away recently.
Yeah.
Obviously, you know, that would have been a tough time in your life. I know during the election, during the last year's election, it was, I remember standing near you, and you got a text message to say that your mother had just been tested for cancer, and I think it come back good or something. I can't recall 100%.
That's how quick it happened.
To see that turnaround, and obviously your mother passed away, you would have been very tough. You know, you would have had mixed emotions, you know, obviously being back into Parliament and all that. Can you tell us a bit of enlighten us on that? Obviously, you know, how tough that's been, just not for you, but for your family.
Yeah.
It's been pretty tough on everyone. You know, I'm not sure if you guys have both your parents still with you, but you know, that's obviously a first for me, having lost a parent. You know, and it was very difficult because my mother went through. She'd been diagnosed with cancer a few years back, and 3 times she had gone through treatment. Once surgery, and then she had radiation therapy. They tried to put her on chemotherapy to start with, but it was not so good. So she, as I said, she then went to surgery, then she went to radiation therapy. And as you said, I got that text message. I can't remember that, so you're doing better than me, but we got that text message during the election to say, all clear. So we were under the illusion that we'd beaten it, that she'd beaten it. That was it. But literally, she became a bit jaundiced, went immediately to the doctors. They said there'd been a reoccurrence, that it was quite aggressive reoccurrence, and that it was actually in part of the liver that just simply could not be operated on. And worse still, it was right in the part where it was blocking a duct that was very, very important to continued bodily functions. And so, you know, that sadly was it from the medical profession. I mean, nothing else really could be offered. And we asked, you know, about all the different things that are out there, but all of them would have a significant risk attached to it of not just loss of life, but painful loss of life, which they weren't comfortable with going forward with. So I got to say that, you know, that's, what does it do? I mean, you know, you obviously think about your own mortality after seeing something like that. You'd obviously go through all of the expressions of grief but one thing that I got to say is that I don't want to get into quackery, but I have always had a belief that medicinal marijuana is something that should be allowed quite liberally in this country. And that shocks a lot of people because they think, oh, you're a conservative, you'd be really anti-drugs. I even think that, you know, not that I'm into it, but recreational use of marijuana is, you know, no one ever died from smoking marijuana. Not that I'd encourage it, but I sort of am not sure that we should go and tackle it with the ferocity that we do. But certainly the medicinal use of marijuana, I do wonder if we'd looked at a different path of treatment, whether we could have tackled that, because there is a lot of circumstantial and anecdotal evidence out there that people have recovered after extreme treatments of medicinal marijuana. I don't understand why. You know, it's not scientifically or medically proven. I'm not suggesting that it is a cure. Saying that if there's one thing that politically that's come out of that, I think that we really need to liberalise the ability of families to access such alternative treatments like that when they need to, quickly, without fear of being breaking or anything like that.
You see a lot of people, you know, breaking the law, you know, giving people with epilepsy, like kids that have 200 seizures a day. You know, you see those people live in fear, and I think there were some people arrested,
absolutely,
and prosecuted, and it's a bit heartbreaking for them. I know, being a parent, you do anything in your power. You know, if it's a case of, you know, if you had a kid doing that, or if you had someone with cancer going through that sort of stuff, you'd give anything a crack.
Well, Bunny, I mean, this might make a headline, hopefully not, but you know, they can't arrest her now because she's gone to a better place. But my mother was illegally acquiring marijuana to control her epilepsy, and it was working.
Yeah. Well, there you go.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. Look,
there are lots of cases of that out there in the world. People doing that because they know it works, and if it's working,
do you
for
think
them.
do you think it's a sad place that you had to do that illegally, and it's something that worked for her?
Yeah, very sad. I think that we're moving in the right direction now. We've opened up things somewhat, but I think it's not enough. Again, you know, it's just not going quick enough, and the distribution of these of medical marijuana or marijuana sort of based medicines is sadly being controlled, and I fear it'll become more and more controlled by pharmaceutical companies. I mean, the ability to buy and grow the plant and the products derived from the plant for medicinal purposes should be quite liberal.
Yeah, it's interesting. There was something on 60 Minutes there I think it was last week, where people suffering PTSD over in San Francisco, I think it was, where they're actually taking MDMA, and it's helping with their PTSD, like under controlled circumstances. They're not just going to a nightclub and popping some pills. They're actually under strict things, and it's actually helping. It was actually a police officer who went there because he'd suffered. He was actually at the Port Arthur massacre, and so he was having dramas with that for that many years. It had affected him, and quite interesting that that he was able to control his PTSD, like his depression, I guess, and it's gone away. And it was interesting just to watch someone from the law who'd probably arrested people for drug use. You know, I don't know if that's true, but it potentially. And to see him actually using it under circumstances,
for medical,
medical.
Well, it is mind altering. Yeah, very interesting. All right, well, George, I'm just going to give you the opportunity now to share any final comments that you might like to for anybody who watches this. You know, it's live streamed, but it is recorded and it remains on our page. So
have we got any questions from anyone first?
Just have a quick check, because I tried to do that before and I was getting that noise. Let's just have a look. Have you got any? Oh yes.
I got a question.
Yeah.
Question from someone that I know. Wanted to know that if Channel 9 didn't take up the NRL again, if we could somehow get the ABC and SBS to run the rugby league.
Well, that'd be a good use of taxpayers' money if the ABC did it, and there might be something in that. So actually, that's a very good idea, and if Channel 9 don't take it up again, that might be something that I advocate for down the track, that the ABC abandon all the money that it's spending on Q&A and put it into footy.
Got a comment from one poster, Troy Thompson, who says, speaking with the German Trade Department, they are keen to take on our beef. Why are we not pushing ahead? Yeah, so I know that there are a lot of other markets that we're now looking at
Troy. I haven't seen that information about Germany, but that is really super interesting for the purposes of the inquiry that I'm undertaking, because the inquiry is particularly looking at the diversification of our export market. So if Germany are interested, then I'm interested.
Very good.
I might follow that up.
Another comment. Train our young future citizens to be involved in manufacturing for exporting goods and keeping our intellectual property here. I mean, that goes without question, doesn't it? Any comments about that?
Here's another one.
Oh,
This is a bit of a funny
About
one.
the same thing?
No. Oh, sorry, did you?
Well, I'll just say you can take that as a comment, but they're right. And if I can say one thing on that, the recent intervention by Christina Keneally, which she was smacked down for by the rest of the Labor Party, saying that we needed to put Australians first when it comes to our workforce, it was a no-brainer. And I've got to say that is the letter of the law or the spirit of the law, I should say, of our immigration system and how it involves our workforce. But often there's caveats and things that people bend to get foreign workers in when they shouldn't be here. So we need particularly to train our own so that we can get more people into manufacturing. We've got a Skilling Australians Fund, which is being boosted to supply funding for that training. So hopefully that's something that we start to see more of in the future.
Music to my ears.
Here's one here. I just got to edit it a tiny bit.
No, go on, give it warts.
Typical northerner.
So it says, can you ask George how to deal with rogue premiers? Ours is an idiot and the Victorian one should be locked up.
Oh my goodness.
Well, the only way you deal with insert expletive here premiers is by voting them out, and we've got the opportunity to do that in October this year. That's the only way we can deal with them. I guess that there've been a lot of people talking about taking the Queensland government to the High Court over the border restrictions. That's also something the premiers have got to remember, that they operate under a legal system and they got to operate within the confines of the Australian Constitution. So you get too big for your boots, well, you're going to have a court rule against you. And if you continue what you're doing, then it is an illegal action. And I guess the Australian Federal Police could turn up on your doorstep. So,
that will be interesting to watch. That's Pauline Hanson calling for that, isn't she? Or at least people coming forward and taking it to the High Court, I believe. Yeah,
they'll win that. If it happens, I've got no doubt they'll win it. There is free flow of transport throughout Australia under our Constitution. Stop. And you can put in some sort of caveat that for a public health reason you've got to quarantine or isolate. Yes, but once that public health reason is gone,
open it up,
diminished, then there wouldn't be a constitutional validity behind the decision to keep that in place. So that'll be tested in court, and I think that she'll find she'll be on the losing side of that.
Be interesting then to, if that's the case, what the consequences will be. Very interesting.
Any more questions, or is that?
I think I'm just scrolling. I think that's it. Have you got any, Brendan? Any others?
No, the people just saying thanks. Great show.
Yep.
Well, just to wrap it up, thank you very much for the opportunity. Good to see you both again. I know that you're both former candidates at the last federal election that I contact with fairly regularly. It's good to see you both. And I just encourage all of your listeners, particularly on that China issue, the foreign entanglement that we have got ourselves into. I just encourage everyone to go to that chinainquiry.com.au, ChinaInquiry.com.au, have your say. It's most important for the future of our nation.
So just to make a little more clarity on that, because often a lot of people say, well, I can see there's problems here, George, but what could I say? What do I write? What kind of things can I put forward? And you'd be suggesting, and correct me if I'm wrong, that people just put forward their fears. They see this down the shop, or this down when they go down the road, or speak to someone from another little neighbouring town. This is what their perception is. So just expressing what their fears and perceptions are would be a good starting point.
Correct. And it doesn't need to be an academic thesis. It's just their views and what they're seeing. I have got suggested words there in, that if people agree with it, they can send that along. There's also a section where they can write their own thoughts on what's going on and what they think our economic situation. So have a look, and if you want to do something completely independent of the website that I've set up, as I said, just Google Joint Standing Committee on Trade and Investment Growth, or the email address again is jsctig@aph.gov.au. That'll get to us.
Excellent.
And just lastly, the Conservative One podcast, when's that on?
Up today, an interview with Alan Jones, believe it or not. So Alan's decided he's retiring from radio on doctor's orders, and I've had a really good interview with him about his life's journey, his background, from a young bloke to where he is today. But more interestingly, I think, is his views on where our nation's at and where our nation needs to go. So there's about 40 minutes of content there, and people can go to conservative1.com or onto the Apple Podcasts app and type in Conservative One. Interestingly, this is a little bit of bragging, but I went on there and I had a look, and I think I'm hovering at about number 28, and it is the top ranked politicians podcast.
Nice.
Well done, you.
That's good.
Well done. Excellent. All right. Well, on that note, George, thank you so much. Time is precious and valuable, and you've given us some today, and we hope it's been of benefit to our viewers today as well. It's been an absolute pleasure listening to your perspectives and views, and, certainly do encourage people to get involved in the inquiry and to present their own personal perspectives and views of what they see that's going on. So thank you, George. Really appreciate it.
Much appreciated, mate.
Have a great weekend.
You guys.
See you next time. Okay.
Pleasure. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, George.
Bye.
Much appreciated. Yeah, some very good insight there. It's always interesting to sort of hear, I guess, a behind the scenes look at, what a politician's thoughts are, and obviously with the China inquiry, I think that's getting George in the headlines at the minute. And it's like he said, it's not just his words; it's the government's words. So it is quite interesting there.
Yeah, and then the other point to make too, George has been a supporter of the creation of a seventh state for a long time now. And when I, became very concerned about the way the Central and North was going ahead, I remember actually accessing some of his material and reading his perspectives on that as well. And, he's so right with, what he says, but you and I are both sold on that vision and that journey that I think we need to make as a nation. But George is one of the strong supporters of it. And it was good to hear him talk about that too today. Yeah,
definitely. And even probably a lot of people wouldn't have thought they would have heard someone who's conservative like George talk about medicinal marijuana. Yeah. So that was interesting also, a good insight.
Yeah, no, it's probably something that is gaining a little bit of traction in some other areas, but obviously, there's reasons behind why it's not being so moving forward and progressive with it. So I think George alluded to big pharma may get involved, and big pharmaceuticals will probably end up getting hold of it. Who knows, Brendan? Who knows?
Yeah, maybe so. And like anything, it'll have a lot of regulation around it, and there'll be people that want to make money out of it, and that's at the end of the day, that's what it'll come down to: people making money, unfortunately, rather than the actual health benefit. So
Yeah. No, I have heard many talk about, the benefits of it. Many. So there's where there's smoke, there's fire. That's for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Well,
All right.
I think that's about it for today. I'm gonna
It is.
go back inside. I've been sitting outside here.
I bet you're cold to the
My feet are
core. I need a cup of coffee. I'm cold inside my
I think
house.
it's still 13 degrees down in air here. I think.
Yeah, it's an unbelievably chilly day, that's for
Yeah,
sure.
it's unbelievable.
Well, once again, it's been a pleasure, and thank you, viewers. We will see you next week. We will no doubt we'll advertise our speaker for next Saturday for high humidity. And it's been great. Thank you again, and everybody have a great weekend.
No worries. Thanks a lot, guys, and we'll talk to you then.
Okay, bye.
Bye.